Thanks, Shannon. We really appreciate the opportunity to showcase our project. It's a real game changer for Brisbane. I don't think we've seen anything like this since South Bank was done post the Expo period. The presentation's in two parts. I'm going to give a very brief introduction and leave Alastair to explain the BIM roadmap, where we've got to now, what we're currently up to, and where we're going for the rest of the project. From a time as a contractor, the thing that really used to annoy me most, and it's not something unfortunately that BIM EPOS can assist in, is what clients want out of the eye in BIM. So being part of DVC's been really good in the fact that we can plot the roadmap that this is what we want as a deliverable, both from our consultants who are working at the moment and the contracting fraternity when they come on. We've got a 99-year development lease on the site, so life cycle costing and all those sort of things come into, the value that we can extract out of the eye. So probably the best thing to do is to give some context about what Alastair's going to talk about later. We'll just go over a bit of the scale of the project. So the best entree is probably the fly-through that was done as part of our bid to state when we won the project. It goes on for about 3 minutes, so just forgive me, just put up with it. Cheers. So DBC, who are we? We're a consortium of Star Entertainment Group and a couple of Chinese-based, or they're actually Chinese out of Hong Kong, companies, Chow Tai Fook and Far East. They're mega companies owned primarily by families. In addition to what they're doing at Queen's Wharf, that same consortia group is also involved in Star Sydney, a lot of work that's being done over in Perth at the moment, Jupiter's Casino at the Gold Coast, and they've just bought Marina Mirage. Chow Tai Fook have also just bought Alinta Energy. I think they paid 4 billion Australian dollars for them 2 or 3 months ago. So they're mega companies. On the project, we've got, because it takes up about 10% of Brisbane's CBD, 20 hectare site, every man and his dog wants to be involved in it. So everybody that you can think of wants to look over our shoulder and have an influence on what we're designing. This is just a list of a few of them. It just goes on and on. The existing conditions, for those of us from Queensland, you'll understand that this area under the Riverside Expressway is not a pretty place to be at night. It's really underdeveloped. The expressway's been an eyesore in Brisbane since it was built, and everyone's struggled with how we get integrated into a precinct revitalisation. So recently the state government moved into their new building at 1 William Street and vacated a lot of these other buildings, the Express, the Executive Building, Neville Bonner, and the Annex. So we've just started demolition of these buildings. So these ones here. And ultimately, that's what the site looks like. So our development agreement goes from the Goodwill Bridge right down to the Victoria Bridge. So in addition to all the sparkly stuff you see here, there's a whole lot of public realm, revitalisation, heritage, and Alastair's presentation will go through some of the work we're doing with that. That just covers the area that our PDA involves. There's actually 3 development agreements. There's the one that covers the IRD itself, and then there's a later stage that revitalises the existing casino. A lot of heritage stuff that we've got to build around, vibration monitoring and slump monitoring that we've got going on at the moment, and Alastair will talk about some of the cloud scanning we've done of those buildings. It's mega, 500,000 square metres of GFA, 80,000 square metres of public realm, 2,000 apartments, 1,200 hotel rooms, and so it goes on. So a mega job. We're just about to start excavation, 600,000 cubic metres of fill to extract. I said earlier, 99-year operation. It makes the, as I say, the I bit out of BIM really valuable to DBC. Luckily, the first day I was on site when I started, Paul Nunn walked into the office. Paul's changed horses since then, but I thought we were in pretty safe hands. So PDC were engaged really early to drive the BIM process, which Alastair will explain. Thank you.
Chris. So I suppose what I'm going to talk to the group today about is how you've seen it's an amazing project, but how we actually approached to implement BIM on something that has multiple different stages, multiple different contractors, multiple different programs, design and construction, and how we're going to tackle that. And what does a client actually want to use BIM for. So get the marketing slide out of the way. PDC is predominantly a shop detailing company that originated in Perth about 44 years ago, but we've transitioned now and we do have a BIM management consultancy division where we deploy BIM strategies and solutions for clients, contractors and trades as required. So we've been engaged by John Holland on the Perth Children's Hospital to deliver an LED 500 deliverable, which we're in the handover stage, working through that at the moment. Worked with Multiplex on the Perth Stadium, which led us to our role on the Queen's Wharf project. We've also done some advisory work for those organisations that you can see there. So what I thought I'd start with is just talking about how we've actually approached it. So there's the BIM implementation timeline on the screen here, which is not all the different stages of the project, but there's the PUP and demo works at the top, so the public utilities and the bringing down of the buildings that Chris discussed. There's the early work stages, which are about to go to tender at the moment, or we're going through the tender review period at the moment, and construction will start towards the back end of this year. And then there's the main works for that IRD, Integrated Resort Development Area. So how do we deploy BIM across a project like this? So when Paul and I started working on this project in 2015, it was very much starting to work on the BIM strategy and the brief. We then obviously moved into a phase of actually writing the BIM plan and understanding what software was on the project, what the consultants were using, and understanding how we could actually achieve BIM on the project. We then, in middle of 2016, moved more into a BIM management phase where we brought more BIM managers on board. We start doing the federation, the clash detection, all those sorts of things on the project. So what that actually looks like in terms of actions is our engagement towards the end of 2015. We then sat down, as Chris said, they have to operate this facility for 99 years. The STAR group have chosen to utilise Maximo, and therefore we started looking at the Maximo as the facility management software. How do we map that back through, all the way through to design, on what we need our design consultants to do, what we need the contractors to do to achieve STAR's FM BIM operations goals. We then, once we'd understood all that and we'd set that, we had a consultant kick-off. So all the consultants were working furiously away through the competition stage, and then when they came on board onto the project, when it was given to DBC, and we actually had to sit down with all of them and realign them slightly and have a bit of a kick-off on this is where we're going and what we're doing. We then issued our BIM plan, and obviously had a lot of negotiation backwards and forwards on managing expectations on what consultants would and wouldn't deliver to the project, while ensuring that we can reach that Maximo deliverable. Written into the consultancy deeds, we then moved into setting up the BIM environment and getting going. And then it's all well and good setting these goals, but then we complete audits on the consultants and contractors to make sure that we're on our way to FM. When the contractors come on board, it's all well and good doing it during design, but we wanted to ensure that what we were asking wasn't ridiculous, or ensuring that the contractors had the capability to deliver on the BIM requirements that we were placing on them. So that was a little bit later on, but we also had tender briefings as well, so where we use the model, which I'll show you a little bit later. We're doing audits at 60 and 90% at the moment, and why there's two different ones on there, because 60% for the main works and 90% for the early works. So managing a model that's at different stages of LOD is probably one of the biggest challenges on this project for us, and we've discussed that. So the BIM team, as Chris said, we've been engaged by Destination Brisbane Consortium as their project BIM managers, but we couldn't achieve what we're achieving on this project without the input of all the consultants. So at the moment, there's 23 different organisations that feed into the BIM process across 16 different pieces of software. So it's quite a beast to manage, but it's very challenging and exciting at the same time. So the BIM process, we've heard talks this morning about the Federated Model. Obviously, bringing it back to basics, we build BIM piece by piece. So if you look at one of these colours, the blue's the architect. We've got 35 Coddy Parker architecture models coming in. We combine them all, we create the Federated Model. But why I wanted to explain that is because on this project, Coddy Parker are in ArchiCAD, and then WSP, who are our main services consultant, is in Revit, in structure and building services. So we had to have a strategic approach to model breakup and have a really good think about it at the start of the job for two reasons. The main reason is obviously thinking about construction, a design program and construction program, because we want to finish the basement model, get it to LOD 300 and then hand it over to the contractor and go from there. But also, ArchiCAD can deal with that entire model that you saw on the video before in one model, and about 80 or 90 people can work on it. Yet when we take that into an IFC file that goes into Revit, we need it in a bite-sized piece that Revit can work with. So we had to really consciously think about our model breakup to ensure that we didn't have consultants or different modelling teams pointing fingers at one another saying that they couldn't work with the files. So this will start leading into the interoperability discussions with different software, which I'll expand on later. So the software, all three wires, I've just touched on it. We've got ArchiCAD, Revit, and AKO Sim and 12D in our civil space. And we also have set up the environment. We're expecting some technical files to come in the mix soon. In terms of management, what we spend 80% of our time in is Navisworks. We compile all the pieces in there, and we also use a tool called iConstruct. iConstruct is a bolt-on to Navisworks. It takes it from being a model viewer to, it's basically our Swiss Army knife. It allows us to automate things, run reports, and basically be a lot more agile with the content that the modelling teams give us. Being an open BIM project with IFC, we have to use Celebri as well. Celebri is really, really good at interrogating the IFC files. And finally, once we've set up that environment, we can then move into actually BIM uses. So we have the Federated Model set up. We can then go to BIM 360 for our commissioning and field management. iConstruct has a module which is Review Track, which is, I'll show you in a second, which is from our coordination meetings and how we manage that. RLB are the cost surveyors. They have their own, quantity surveyors, sorry. They have their own costing software in ROS 5D. They use that. And finally, obviously, where we're going, IBM Maximo for facilities management. So I'm not going to talk through this slide, but that's just representing it in a different format and showing you how everything kind of feeds into the Navisworks model, the single point of truth. Now, we all know federated models. They're nothing new. But why I wanted to talk about them was without this, we wouldn't be able to leverage the benefits moving forward. And we create this model weekly. We create when a WSP hand over their model to a Nielsen's, we turn off the WSP model, we turn on the Nielsen's model, and we make sure we manage that change to ensure that the single point of truth, the federated model, is the single point of truth. Just on the federated model as well, it makes BIM accessible to the entire project team. So Chris, for example, I don't think Chris wants to have ArchiCAD, Revit, 12D, AKOSIM, all of these pieces of software on his laptop. We give the design team Navisworks, and we also colour code it. We set up a heap of views level by level, and it really does make BIM accessible. 216 models from 23 companies, which we're federating weekly at the moment. In the top left-hand corner, that's WSP's services model, which is all colour-coded, and we try and colour-code it to the Australian standard colour-coding system, so there's that connection between site and the federated model. In terms of clash detection is nothing new, or virtual coordination reviews. This is some of the results from the basement and public utilities work that we went through. But what I wanted to talk about here with clash detection is that there's a coordinated approach to clash detection. So we are not clashing and doing clash meeting reviews or whatever on the main works at the moment. We're about 50-60% design. There is still a lot of things moving around. It's pointless to do coordination on that area at the moment. We align our clash meetings to the design and construction program, which as you can see down here, we're the Goodwill extension, which is the early works, and the early works for the basement excavation. That's what's focused our coordination on up to date. We don't track clashes, we track issues. So if we clash the entire model, we're going to have 400,000 clashes, etc. We're going to fly through the early works with the team, all the heads of state at the meeting table, and we raise an issue. You can see on the left here, this is the outcome from a meeting. There's a conduit and pit that aren't aligned, and there's some actions here for WSP to action this, etc., etc. Because this all goes into the system iConstruct review track, it's basically just a database. So we create this federated model every single week, but if we added comments into that dies because next week we create a new model. So any comments that we raise in our coordination meetings go to review track, which is a database sitting above all the models, and you can just deploy that back on any iteration of a model. It gives us the flexibility then to run coordination reports. So a WSP, for example, have 10, 20 items outstanding, and the red ones are 45 days overdue. We can also run dashboard reports, which allow for someone like Chris, I can put that in front of him and say, during the coordination process, these people are playing really well, these people aren't, and we can really get the coordination moving and closing out items. Challenges to date. I'm going to put the BIM plan there. It's both a challenge and an opportunity. I told you about the steps that we've taken to deploy BIM on the project. We had sessions, I think Chris really loved coming along to these sessions, but we had 6-hour sessions, 400 BIM plan comments, working through diameter of size of piping to be modelled, mechanical, not just with the services trades, with everyone. It was painful at the start, but we are now really starting to reap the rewards because everyone's expectations was managed in terms of what they're going to deliver in the BIM space. The only other thing that we did differently on this one, we all know about LODs, and LODs fundamentally talk about the geometry. There's not too much definition about the actual information. So what we actually set up, as you can see on the screen here, is obviously we've got the LOD matrix, but we also went through and set up data deliverable tabs or levels of information. So we've got our different design stages, 30, 60, 90%, fabrication, construction, commissioning and handover. And this is for concrete, for example, but in here there'll be concrete grade, which is required by the structural engineer to go into the model at the 60% design stage. So we went through and we created that with every single trade package and worked with the consultants on what they would and wouldn't deliver. This is all in the intention of making sure that that model can be handed over and further developed and not thrown out and put in the bin when we go to construction. Big challenge, interoperability between the differing software. For those of you that know Revit and ArchiCAD, ArchiCAD, you basically open up ArchiCAD, you fly to the position in the world where your project is and you start modelling. Revit, you can open it up, start modelling wherever you want, and then you spin the world under your feet to position your building. Fundamentally, two different approaches to how coordinates work, and it causes a lot of issues in terms of round-tripping models in the collaboration process from one player to the next. So what that means is we actually have to transfer the files, the IFC files, through the project 000 point, but we also want a federated model, a real-world coordinates model. So what that's ultimately ended up in is that Cotty Parker or anyone in ArchiCAD provide us two different IFC files at two different coordinates, and a WSP, who are doing all the building services, provide us two different IFC files. Yes, it's more models, yes, it's more upload requirements, but it's the open BIM space that we have to work with. But we do have it working now. There's lots of things like Dynamo, etc., which can automate exports from Revit. So, you know, WSP have implemented them and they don't really have any concerns with the amount of uploads that we're requesting of them. IFC. For those of you that have worked with IFC, some people speak very highly of it, some people speak very poorly of it. IFC, without a managed approach, is a massive, massive challenge, and IFC was a risk to the project. So we identified this early, and for those of you that don't know IFC too well, the easiest way I can explain it is we need to come out of ArchiCAD, and there's a translator, and then we go through a mapping file into Revit. I basically call them cheese graters. It goes through a cheese grater, it goes through another cheese grater, and ends up in Revit. And then fundamentally what we have to do is we go back from Revit, back into ArchiCAD, and it goes through those cheese graters again. If you don't line up those holes, then the data is not going to flow. So what we have done is we engage Mitchell Bramman, a lot of you would know him, Scott Beasley. He's our specialist sub-consultant that comes on board, and we do periodic reviews about every month, 2 months. As the models are being developed, more and more things get added into the model that we need to ensure are going through those cheese graters. So we have a managed approach to IFC. On top of this as well, we have a monthly IFC deficiency workshop where any issues that have been raised over that month with IFC, we sit down and workshop with the consultants, and you'd be surprised how easy some of them are to fix. It's just someone naming something different or using a different tool when they model, and it's been really, really collaborative. Getting the rooms to spaces. So we've got ArchiCAD creating our architecture rooms, yet obviously we want to transfer those into Revit for our MEP teams to be able to schedule elements from. We had a lot of issues with this starting off, but give credit to Graphisoft. Graphisoft, one of our BIM managers on the project used to work for Graphisoft, got a lot of ArchiCAD experience. He leveraged his relationship with Graphisoft, and they've actually created a new build for ArchiCAD, which has solved this problem. So still have some issues with it. There needs to be unique room names, otherwise the thing blows up. But it is a solution that we have now resolved to ensure we can schedule from the model on the MEP space. Multiple stages and programs. I've already alluded to it a little bit with the timeline, but the biggest challenge for us on this one, we've done the past projects, the Perth Children's Hospital Stadium. they're one major project that sits there and moves through design, then through construction and through into handover. This one, we've got potentially 7 different stages, which are all moving at different speeds. So to manage the models at different stages has required a bigger BIM management force to achieve what we need to achieve. So that's our challenges, and now get into some of our successes. So I believe Ash and Liam from Bennett & Bennett are somewhere in the crowd, so if they want to put their hand up. But Bennett & Bennett have come on board, and we point cloud scanned the entire precinct. You can see the point cloud in the top left-hand corner. And then they went through and back-modelled. So 17 buildings, 4 surfaces, including the riverbed. So because we're putting the bridge across the South Bank, we needed to understand what the riverbed looked like, and they've actually LiDAR scanned that as well. The biggest win, though, is the in-ground services model. So they went out and they LiDAR scanned the areas that we needed them to, and then they also combined as-built records, some tracing, dial before you dig data on places that we didn't have information, and they created this in-ground services model. Different levels of accuracy was tagged on it, so something that's tagged A, we know that's exactly where it is, and something that's tagged D, that's roughly where we think it is. We then managed pro-build through when they installed the in-ground services, and whenever they opened up the ground, they had to capture the information and feed it back to Bennett & Bennett to update the existing in-ground services model. Very, very important for us, because pro-build potentially may, I don't know if they'll get another contract, they're obviously bidding for it, but who's the next contractor on board? We need to ensure that that in-ground services model is accurate, because it's going to be used by another contractor. Multiple different lots and precincts across the site, and as Chris said there, you saw all the stakeholders that are involved. There's multiple different applications, approvals, processes, depending on which lot. So we modelled them and put those, Bennett & Bennett provided that, modelled those and put them into the model, and as you can see here, you can see the effect on the federated model, and you can understand which part of the model is in what lot. And furthermore, the REX, the Riverside Expressway, has some vomitories that we're not allowed to encroach on, and it was really easy to see if any of the design content was overlapping into that space. This tree, which is in Miller Park, the tree I believe is heritage listed and needs to remain, so they laser scanned it and we're using it in the federated model. A bit of a gimmicky one, but it's actually working. Modelling for clashes. So during the scoping exercise with WSP, we made sure that the clearance zones for major plant and equipment and cable trays were included. Currently, all cable trays have a 200mm clearance on them. I'm sure once we go through the finite coordination process, that may get squeezed. But at the moment, that is at 30% design, that was in the model. So ensuring that the design, there was comments this morning about ensuring that it's constructible. We're trying to make sure we achieve that. And up the top, the heritage buildings. The state government have a lot of rigour around the setbacks for the heritage buildings, and also how we're looking after them. So the whole laser scanning approach was an easy one to decide on. And we've now modelled the heritage setbacks, or the planning development requirements, which the architects can link straight into their model, and we can see if the design changes are now encroaching past those commitments that the consortium have made to the state government. So it's an MEP conference, so this slide is to glorify the services on the project. This is the services federated model, which is coming from 7 different organisations at the moment, led by WSP in the IRD area. But the interesting thing as well on this one is that we're not just dealing with commercial building services. For those of you that know Brisbane, that's the river down there and the Riverside Expressway. This is Margaret Street, this is William Street, and you can see all the in-ground services that we're having to deal with, both new and old and relocated. So it's infrastructure, linear infrastructure and commercial building services. Even to the point that the water fountain bubblers, where all the kids run through in the public open space, Commercial Aquatics Australia, that's their model. That was their first model they provided. So we're at a 50% design phase, and you can see the amount of detail that they already provided at 50%, which is really even the water fountain. But anyway, so this is just some of the. Once you have that federated model, you can kind of go anywhere. So City models, we got InfoWorks, we got Brisbane City Council to provide us their model. We link those in and you can get a really good context of what the actual federated model is going to look like. The Consortium absolutely love this because you can see what the views are going to look like from hotel rooms. So we start moving into a marketing space. A client can sell an apartment because this is going to be the view. Obviously, Navisworks federated model is not render quality, but it starts selling the story. This one, we're putting a new bridge in, and there's a ferry terminal here and a ferry terminal here, and the ferry captains were upset because of the tidal movement, so they didn't know that they were actually going to be able to get around this pylon. So there was about 6 weeks of debate happening between the consortium, or not debate, sorry, but conversation happening between the consortium and TransLink, and this basically solved a discussion to move to the next stage very, very quickly. It took us about 10-15 minutes in Navisworks to knock up. So a little bit gimmicky, but you can see where you can start using this federated model. Another use, we all know 4D, construction programming, attaching the program to the model, but this was used for the public. We've got a lot of focus from the public on this project, being in the CBD, 10% of the CBD, and everyone wanted to know what was happening. So we created this little 4D video, which Channel 7 actually used on the news in Queensland, and it's on the Facebook page. So using 4D in a little bit of a different manner. And just to show you that in real, so this is where we're at right now. I think Chris pulled this off down on Friday last week. And this is the demolition that's coming down at the moment. So this is the current status of the site and where we're at. Interestingly, if you just watch the Neville Bonner building, you can see that ProBuild really attacked that in the last week and basically gone. So I don't know if there was program issues or what, but they've definitely achieved what they needed to. So moving on to 5D, just in terms of RLB are using the model for 5D, but just internally what we're using it for with the consortium. It's a $3 billion project. In terms of structure, it's going to put a lot of concrete supply demands on Brisbane. So we took all the quantities from the structure model and looked at the program, and we could actually start working out volume. So in January 2020, we know what the concrete demand we're going to be placing on the Brisbane market. We also, in terms of facades, this was using iConstruct and Navisworks, and in terms of facades, this was Celebri, just taking out some facade quantities straight away. Virtual reality, I'll just get this going. In terms of virtual reality, I honestly thought this was a gimmick when I know I'm a BIM manager, but I thought it was a gimmick when we got asked to do virtual reality. I said, yeah, we can do that. We've taken the Navisworks model, we've exported it from there, and we take it into Unity, and then Unity into the VR space. This VR headset, it's allowed the client to understand and see what they're buying and what they're going to receive in 2022. The architects use it for spatial understanding and awareness. The landscapers have it in their office. So this fundamentally has been a great tool. The public office, the communications office, will have a VR headset in it for the public to come in and look at the project. It takes us about a week to create the VR model from the federated model. It's quite an easy task to do. Touch screen, so this is in the office where Chris and I sit, and it's got the federated model touch screen, collaborative meetings around it, so making sure that everyone is using this model that we're creating. Conscious of time, so I'll just speed up a little bit. The early works and PUP coordination, massive success. So this is the basement. We had to divert all the services along George Street back down Margaret, and we had 6 weeks of coordination process through that. Now, you can do all this coordination, but then the utilities come along, utilities providers, and kind of stuff up all your hard work. So we actively involved Energex and Telstra in the process, and the first model that we received is this pink conduit one here, which it ducks and dives over existing services, and the first model we received from Telstra, managed by ProBuild, was clash-free. We then used the models for the early works tenders, as I discussed earlier, colour-coded the models based on scope. So it was very, very clear for the contractors to see what their scope was going to be. Moving on to just where we're going next and how we're going to capture information during construction is capturing that COBie information for the Maximo deliverable. And we have invested a lot of time in reviewing BIM 360 to the point that we had Autodesk fly out their BIM 360 kind of gurus, and we sat in a room for a week, and we kind of went through all the ifs, buts, maybes, and how it was actually going to work, because at the end of the day, we're a developer through DBC. We're not a contractor, and we're going to have multiple different contractors, so how are we going to deploy something like BIM 360 onto the project? So for those of you that don't know BIM 360, we've got our federated model that I've been discussing. It goes onto the cloud, and then in Glue, you can review the models on the iPad on site, and then in field, this is where we capture the information that we require for commissioning, defects, etc. As I spoke about the challenges, we're potentially going to have 3 or 4 different contractors. It's not decided yet on the main works. So we need to capture safety, QA, QC, and commissioning data across all of those 3 different contractors and their trades. By having BIM 360 as a hub, it allows us to capture all that information, and then it will allow us to have project dashboard reporting across the trades and contractors. And finally, the commissioning space, we've done a lot of work in there to make sure we can capture the COBie information that we want. So we've set up a lot of template projects. And finally, as I've said, acknowledgements to CAD Group and Autodesk, who made that week work and come out and make sure and answer all our questions before we could actually get it across the line. In terms of as-built, Stevens Lane, ProBuild, Nielsen's, Christopher's, this is the as-built model coming through here, and you see I've selected this pipe, and we're starting to get the as-built information back in there. So we are verifying as-builts as we move through. Planning for facilities management, massive project, multiple different areas. We had to have a precinct naming approach. So level naming, equipment naming, and room naming has all been defined up front, and it's all based on these different areas: goodwill extension, IRD, the landing, bridge, etc. All well and good setting all of these rules, but if we don't ensure, it's just like planning or standard project management. If you set a plan, you need to review it, realign to it, etc., etc. So we undertake these model audits. We use a number of different tools. We provide a report back, and we use a traffic light system. So this was the first audit with Cotty Parker. There was not much Omni-class coming through. You see a red light. We now have started getting that information through at the 60% stage. And where we're going, and this is where we're going. So this is the Navisworks interface for IBM Maximo. So you can see that our federated models in Navisworks, our BIM 360 Glue field capture is going to feed back through, and we're going to end up in IBM Maximo. So just concluding the next steps and where we're going, you can see that the project goes on to 2022, but just next steps is we're going to really, really ramp up in our design coordination workshops for the main work. So we're going to start having all of the VCR meetings with the consultants. Early FM mobilisation. So we are liaising with STAR right now in terms of how they're using Maximo and what they want from that, and testing that what we've provided and the file types we have and the models actually fit into Maximo, and it's going to be a fit for purpose delivery. BIM 360 field, which I just spoke about, we're going to implement that on the early works as the contractor is awarded towards the end of the year. We're ready to go on that. We've got a user manual. We've got all the licenses ready. We're really excited about those next steps. Contractor capability review, again for the main works. This one will probably have a lot more rigour around it, a lot more interviews and understanding that the contractor with their services team can actually deliver on what we're asking. Going through that model handover process for the main works, and then moving into the contractor and trade coordination workflow. So this is not about throwing the model in the bin and starting coordination again. It's taking the consultant's models and then doing your value engineering, putting in your chosen materials, your chosen equipment, and then going through that final steps of coordination. As-built validation, so laser scanning, all of those types of things to ensure that we're getting our FM model, and then doing our audits at 90%, and contractor and trade BIM induction. So part of our role, we have inductions, we have training, we go into the offices of the contractors and trades and assist them with whatever they need need assistance with to ensure that we can get there. And finally, just want to say, as much as it's me who gets to stand up here and present on the project and what we're doing in terms of BIM, I think we're doing some really, really great things. it's a coordinated team effort. There is a BIM coordinator in every single one of those organisations who's, in my eyes, is very, very, very talented, and without their efforts inside their own coordination, we wouldn't be able to achieve what we're doing here. So with that, just to prove that it's not all smoke and mirrors, and I'm happy to show anyone this a little bit later, but this is our federated model. This one was produced last Friday, as you can see by the date up here. If we look at the pup world, that's the George and Margaret Street intersection, and then our services IRD federated model. So thank you for your time.